So Rishi Sunak will pay France £478 million in a deal to finally bring an end to the small boats crisis. Following crunch talks in Paris today, French President Emmanuel Macron agreed to deploy 500 more cops on beaches where dangerous channel crossings start. And the president announced the opening of a new detention centre to help French border force cope with the masses of migrants being trafficked by people smugglers around the world. In return for the £500 million, France will also form a new highly trained and permanent mobile policing unit dedicated to illegal migration. High-end drones, helicopters, planes and fresh surveillance tech will be used to ramp up intelligence sharing between British and French forces. And all French efforts to tackle small boats will be overseen by a 24/7 zonal coordination centre where permanent UK liaison officers will be based. So here's the question, will it work? Let's get reaction from the leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton. Neil, Rishi Sunak has made it one of his 5 pledges to stop the boats. Will the forthcoming legislation in the House of Commons and this deal with France do the trick?
Well, no, certainly this deal with France today won't do the trick. You know, £500 million to carry on doing what's been totally ineffective for the last 5 years. The only thing that will stop the boats coming across is if we intercept them, or if they reach our shores, return all the migrants on those boats back to France. But Macron said right at the start of proceedings that that wasn't going to happen. They weren't even going to discuss it. So it can't work. We'll have 500 extra officials to police a 70-mile line of beaches. I mean, it's a nonsense. It's like trying to fill a sieve with water. It simply can't be effective. The politicians throughout the whole of Europe are in denial about the scale of migration. We had 50,000 in small boats coming across the channel last year. We've had 3,000 this year already. The pull factors for the migrants are far too great to allow these sort of sticking plaster solutions to work. So for all the pawing and stroking of bottoms and mutual masturbation on the platform of the two little globalist international bankers, Sunak and Macron, nothing is going to happen. And Macron said, he had the gall to say that all these problems are actually a consequence of Brexit. Well, of course, they're not, because one of the reasons why Macron is refusing to take back migrants who cross the channel illegally from France is because he's got a dispute with Italy going on, because Italy is refusing to take the migrants that are flowing from Italy into France. So the much vaunted Dublin Convention, which is supposed to be the answer of the EU to all this illegal migration, is simply not working even inside the EU. So politicians have just got to get a grip. And the reason why the bill going through the House of Commons won't work is because the European Convention on Human Rights will stand in the way and block its effect.
Well, let's go through this methodically, bit by bit. You are, after all, a lawyer as well as a politician, Neil. I watched the press conference with keen interest as it was carried live and uninterrupted on GBNews. I missed the bottom stroking, so I look forward to the X-rated version at some point. However, the detention centre built on French soil is surely a win for Sunak.
Yeah, well, if they can manage to capture and detain these migrants. But I mean, the numbers are just so great that you know, it may have some marginal effect, but it's not going to solve the problem. You know, there are hundreds of millions of people in Africa and the Middle East and elsewhere who want to come to Europe. And they're desperate to get in, and nothing will stop them ultimately, unless we decide upon really draconian measures. And certainly the scale of what's been agreed today is nothing like what is needed to police the French beaches. There are sand dunes all down that Normandy coast, which are tailor-made for hiding in, and migrants are trying to get across the channel in tiny little boats that are very easy to construct and very lightweight to transport onto the beaches, and they'll do this 24 hours a day. You know, we've seen arrivals on our beaches at dawn, so they've been paddling across the channel in the dark. You know, it was a fantastically stupid and dangerous thing to do, but nevertheless, they're so desperate to get across the channel, they will be prepared to do it. And this is happening in the Mediterranean as well. Of course, Italy has got a massive problem, Greece has got a massive problem, but the EU will simply not steel itself to do what is necessary to sort it out, because they're all actually consumed ultimately by the ideas which are in the European Convention on Human Rights, which is a document that was designed to deal with the problems of 70 years ago, not the problems of today. And it's not fit for purpose.
Neil, much as you'd like it, many of my viewers and listeners would like it, turning the boats back to France is not going to happen anytime soon. But Sunak is nobody's fool. He wants to be re-elected. And of course, Boris Johnson achieved victory in 2019 by getting Brexit done. Well, Sunak has identified stopping the boats as a potentially game-changing policy. So he will want to have some success with that. Do you think he'd be willing to ditch our membership of the European Convention on Human Rights in order to make it happen?
No, of course not. And he's made that absolutely clear. When Suella Braverman was musing about this just a few weeks ago, Sunak slapped her down straight away. He himself was musing about it some time ago, and I said then it'll never happen. He'll never agree to it. No. I mean, he is a little globalist international banker, and he isn't going to have the guts to leave a convention which has long outlived its purpose. You know, why do we need to be in the European Convention on Human Rights when countries like Australia and New Zealand and Canada have had very liberal governments in the last few years, can manage to have their own human rights laws which they're satisfied with? No, we don't. But if we could tweak the convention to suit the conditions of today, then nobody would object to the provisions of that document. But we can't do that because the European Court of Human Rights actually makes the law, and the convention is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to amend. And Sunak is just not up to the job. If we had Thatcher as Prime Minister, it's a battle that we might start and win. But, Sunak is no Thatcher. I mean,
however, former government chief lawyer Robert Buckland, Neil, former government chief lawyer Robert Buckland told me on this programme that our membership of the European Convention on Human Rights is a red herring and that ditching it wouldn't make a difference. And I just want to revisit this issue, that the Prime Minister knows that the stopping the boats policy is a potentially existential threat to him. Get it right, he wins the next election. Get it wrong, and he doesn't. Are you honestly saying that he's that duplicitous that he would be willing to essentially lie to the British people, giving the impression he'll stop the boats when he never will?
Well, he's either duplicitous or delusional. Take your choice. Either way, he's screwed, isn't he? Because he's not going to do what is necessary to solve the problem. And merely putting down on paper a wish list of things that you'd like to happen isn't going to ensure that they do happen. And so unless we can actually stop the boats by returning the migrants who get to these shores, then he's not going to solve the problem.
Neil, I was in a good mood when I started the show. It is Friday night. You probably haven't had your first gin and tonic yet. Is there anything positive about this agreement with France today? Oh, there it is. There you go. His glass is a quarter full. Is there anything positive from the deal with Macron today? Is there anything positive about the forthcoming legislation to stop the boats?
Well, I wish that the legislation which has been proposed would be effective. I personally do believe that Suella Braverman wants to and would, if she had the power, solve the problem. But the trouble is, she's not the Prime Minister, and most of the cabinet don't have the will to do what is necessary. Today's deal, doesn't set us back. And of course, I want good relations with France. But good relations are of no consequence unless the French are prepared to agree to what would sort the problem out. They don't want all these migrants on the Normandy coast either. I mean, the communities on the other side of the Channel feel in the same way as the people who live in Kent and Sussex do. So I don't understand why France and Britain bilaterally can't do a deal on this.
OK, well, Neil, ask Christine to open another bottle of Jacob's Creek and we'll catch up soon. Thank you so much for your time. Look, Neil speaks with authority. He's a lifelong Eurosceptic. He's the leader of UKIP and he's a lawyer as well. He's not happy with this deal with France. It's throwing good money after bad, he says, and it's counterproductive. Let me know your reaction, Mark, at gbnews.uk.